How to make a great data team in an enterprise environment. How to foster collaborative culture, and what are common mistakes that should be avoided. What challenges ChatGPT generates for enterprise environment, and what threats large generative models create, and where are we heading now? Following is my conversation with Dennis Holovatyi, co-founder of Osnova and founder of EnterpriseAI Consulting. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Dennis, the topic you are very passionate about, how to make a great data team in an enterprise.
Yeah, that's a broad topic, let's say. There are many ways you could or should do that. I approach this topic from, let's say, a couple of perspectives, which are in essence applicable not just to data teams, I would say, but some are pretty specific. So one part that people often forget about is incentives. I was even recently talking to one data expert friend of mine, and we had like an hour-long discussion about incentives in data teams. And this is something that many people leave out of the question because they think salary is enough, or salary plus bonus or whatever is enough. For data scientists, it's often kind of a special or specific breed of IT people, let's say, because of the fact that data science has been growing like crazy in the past 10 years. This is more of a employee-driven market. So not always, not in every country, let's say, but oftentimes it's the data scientists themselves who have more of a market power and can decide where they want to work, like which company. And
it's IT market in general like this.
Oftentimes I would say in data science it's even more pronounced, at least from what I've experienced, because I mean now it's also kind of getting slowly more equalized, because in the last also 10 years a bunch of different programs for data science were opened in multiple universities, so the lack of data science skill on the market is not as big as it used to be. But what I mean by that is that data scientists, they tend to just drop the job if they don't like the data that they work with, or if they don't like the procedures for data access, which might sound like being a picky whoever employee, and probably it is, but it's been many times, I've heard it from many of my customers and partners, that it's difficult to retain data scientists, to keep them in the job if they don't like what they're working on. Because you can almost always find another position and feel happier there. So one of the big incentives to keep data scientists and to build a team out of them is actually to create an environment that fosters their development, right? So something as simple as having easy access to the necessary tables, something as simple as being able to talk directly to the business that they're working with, which is also not always the case. Let's say data scientist is very deep in the IT department, which I generally do not suggest my customers to do, which many of them still do. If data science or data analytics or whatever you call it is, let's say, only a part of IT, it often means that they suffer from all of the same problems that IT suffers from, which, building bridges between IT and business has been a topic for the past, 30, 50 years probably. For data science, it exaggerates the problem because of the second part, let's say, of how to build a team. How do you set up their work? Like, work in data science is very experimental. Compared to normal software development, this is probably the biggest difference, or one of the biggest differences. In software development, you generally, unless you're building a completely new solution, which for most enterprises is not actually the case, they're building relatively standard, apps and websites and internal tooling and APIs and so on. Unless you're building a completely novel and innovative solution, you kind of know what you're building, right? You can define user stories in advance if you want, pretty much for the whole project. And of course, some requirements change, but also a senior developer or team lead would know long this or that specific feature would take to develop. In data science, it's usually not the case. Sometimes it is, but usually it's not the case because you have a large experimental or unknown part in your work, which is quite literally buried deep in the data, right? When you access the data set for the first time, especially if it's a new company or a new team that doesn't have established processes yet, you have no idea what's going on with that data. If you have a lot of missing values, if your distributions are weird, if the master data, if you're working, let's say, on standard corporate systems such as SAP or Salesforce, you don't know if the master data actually makes any sense. And all those problems, they accumulate and they often fall on the shoulders of data scientists. And data scientists don't want to deal with that because you have other roles to deal with those issues. You can have a data engineer, you have a data owner, you have a project manager. And in a lot of companies, they don't really understand these differentiations, and they try to put all that burden on the shoulders of a data scientist, and they quit. And if they quit,
That's quite a way often when, let's say, it's misunderstood whose role is whose in the data team.
Exactly.
So I think that, let's say, data scientists are quite a bohemian bunch nowadays, reminding me a little bit, let's say, of marketing, advertising people in the 1990s.
Well,
the industry was attracting very many people from various walks of life, and they learned on the job. So, is it like what? I know it's almost always a combination of the two, but what's the decisive factor? Money or the project that's moving something forward?
Ooh, wow. Well, that's a very broad question, of course, which most people reply very personally to, right? What's their inner motivation or driver? Which is, I mean, it's a very generic answer, to be honest.
Or maybe let's reformulate it a bit. Can you keep data scientists only with the money?
Probably not. Unless you're paying shit tons of money like Google does, let's say, or Facebook. It's been also, I mean, it's been known for a while now, but you've probably seen, like, in the light of the recent layoffs from large technology companies, it has come to light once again that many of those companies, they hire high-level senior engineers and pay them 300K per year just to keep them from going to a different company, and they do nothing. So it is possible, if you pay really like a lot, way above the average market salary, but this level of remuneration is not available for most businesses. Most businesses, especially in Europe, cannot or do not pay this kind of money. And if you don't, and let's say the salary in your company and in competitor companies or similar companies, let's say, is more or less the same, give or take a couple of thousand, it doesn't actually affect people that much. Especially, let's say, it's funny that you mentioned that marketeers used to be kind of a mixed bunch. For data scientists, it's also true. Like myself, I have management background, right? And I learned data science essentially because I was tired of doing PowerPoints. Fortunately, I cannot say that I don't do PowerPoints right now, but at least it's not the only thing I do. And yeah, I came into the field from a management background. Some people come into the field from physics background, statistics background, chemistry. Some even come from fields like history, which you would say, is far away from a quantitative discipline like data science or analytics. But some people do.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. History is also based on data in reality.
Well,
I'm saying this as a history buff.
Sure.
No, it's
sure.
Half joke, half not.
It is because, I mean, you have the so-called also long data, and long data is basically historic data, which sometimes spans across thousands of years. But this is, let's say, very different from the approach. Okay, I'm biased here probably, but different from the approach or from the understanding that I have and most people in the market have when they hear a data scientist. Usually you don't imagine a historian analyzing, let's say, the span of the Egyptian civilization and talking about how the problems with the Nile River were as relevant today as they were 7,000 years ago. It's also data analysis in a way, and you put a historic perspective on it. but let's say different approach. You don't really talk about big data when you're talking about history.
So we need to provide some good money, as a rule. But this is just the entry condition. The second condition is we need to provide good data. From what you've said so far.
Interesting data. Not only good data. Yeah, I didn't mention that. But data quality and access are also, I mean, they are basic fundamental things. They must be prerequisites. And I say that while knowing that sometimes I wait for a month to get data from my customers when I work on the project, and this is extremely frustrating. And I believe in any kind of data-driven company, it should be basically on the flick of a finger. You request the data, you get it approved the same day. A couple of hours later, you have it. Right? That should be the worst scenario, because usually it should be actually self-service. If you have the respective rights and the use case in front of you, you should have access to the data pretty much immediately, which almost never happens. This is a utopia. This doesn't really exist in real life, but this is how it's supposed to be in my eyes. But access to data is just, again, it's just a boring technical prerequisite. Data should be interesting in some way. And in what way data could be interesting, it will depends on the background of the data scientist, what they have worked before and what they haven't seen, right? And usually something that you haven't seen before is more interesting because it's novel, because it's exciting, right? Now, as I've done like more than 40 projects in data science across many different areas of modern businesses, projects in marketing that you mentioned, or customer service, procurement, sales, production, inventory management, in many different areas. So for me now in that space, it's actually kind of difficult to find a project that would be very novel for me and, spark interest just for the sake of it, right? Now I'm much more interested, and I've been interested in that field, but now even more and more in the hyped field of generative AI. Like I just love this thing. I love the way it works. I see huge potential for generating synthetic data as well as one of the
we'll come to this
tangential points. Yeah, and this is something that excites people just in a very natural way. It's in a way sort of like for an artist, if you want to paint a landscape, but you are a hired artist and somebody hires you to paint their portrait, you might still paint it and you might even enjoy it a little bit if you just like the process, but you won't get the same type of fulfillment, I guess, if that you would if you painted the landscape.
You can still create great painting, because this is a beautiful analogy, because this reminds me of Caravaggio, who was
Caravaggio. Why?
Caravaggio a couple of more 15 plus years ago. I happened to go to Malta with a client of mine. At the time I was a lawyer.
Nice.
And there happened to be it was November, and it was an incredible exhibition of Caravaggio, and I learned in Malta. And I learned that he spent all his life in Malta being a painter hired by the order of the Knights of St. John, because he was an alcoholic, he was in debt, and he escaped from the kingdom of Naples to Malta. He would have escaped anywhere just to avoid his debt, his creditors. And they told him, Caravaggio, you paint religious scenes. You don't give a damn if you like it or not. You just do it. And he was the first guy in the history of painting who created this modern kind of light. And actually a kind of prototype of photography in painting from 600 years ago. So this is just an anecdote on the side. But what I'm getting at is we ticked money, we ticked interesting data, well-prepared data, we ticked a team that has visible, clear divisions of who does what. Sounds like
Yeah.
ABC of management anywhere, to be honest, so
Yeah.
far. But then we are coming to the point, is a good manager in a data science team able to wrap up a project so that it would look interesting to most data scientists?
You mean how they're supposed to do it, or what exactly?
How to wrap it up just to show the people that it's interesting, it's valuable, it's worth taking this project, taking this job, or is it just will be flipping, let's say, from side to side for the years to come, because there will be always a new ChatGPT, so people like a head will come from this kind of technology, this kind of novelty to that kind of novelty, and so on. Or with good manager, you can make them stable just to showing them the attractiveness of what they do. What's your reflection on it?
Well, I think that there always should be a balance between, hey, let's do the thing that works and let's explore something new, right? Exploration versus exploitation debate. There should be a balance. The good manager needs to find it, and a balance is such that your operational processes work. Well, they're well defined. They work. They run. You always know where you started a data project. You know always where you end. If it's not just a project but building a data product, then you know where you productize this whole thing, right? Where you stop this project mode where you have a start and an end, inside into product mode where you again, as a normal software product, do iterative development. That's, let's say, on one side. On the other side, most organizations, they do have a need, which they don't always realize, to explore new approaches and new technologies, because frankly, well, somebody in your competition will do that if you don't, right? If you have I don't know, ChatGPT or Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, those kind of tools available today, and you just try to close your eyes like a baby, they close their eyes and think that the object disappear until they're like 2 or 3 years old and they understand project permanence. Many companies behave like that. Many managers behave like that. And in the field of data, again, it's more dangerous than in other fields because it's growing like crazy. I mean, if you've seen the news in the last 5 months, I've been in the field for 8 years, and I'm scared of what's going on. I'm surprised and scared, and even my quite optimistic and estimates, let's say, on when certain things will happen, such as OpenAI releasing their plugins, for example, or the release of Hugging GPT, which is a model to manage other models to execute complex multi-step tasks. I thought it's going to happen in about a year or more, but it has already happened a couple of weeks ago. And I'm like, well, okay, instead of having a year, they did it like in 2-3 months. Let's say after I thought about this idea. And it means I was off a factor of 6, right? Which is crazy. And I just spoke recently to a journalist from Switzerland, and she unfortunately has this kind of, well, unfortunately, it's my take on it, of course, but she has this kind of, hey, if I don't look at it long enough, maybe it will go away thing. Well, a manager and a data team cannot allow themselves to do that, because if they only rely on what works today in such a fast-paced field, when you have a new paper released, frankly, every day, no, it's not an exaggeration. You have a new revolutionary paper released every day in the last weeks and months. I can't keep up even reading them. Well, then you're going to be out of business very soon. That's also, I guess, one of the differences of the field, that we'll need to move very fast. In terms of organization, well, in terms of you are right in the sense that in many ways, organizing the data team is kind of a management ABC, with a couple of caveats here and there, which are based, let's say, on the more experimental nature of data science work. You cannot, for example, normal Scrum doesn't really work for data. And that's my opinion. There's a lot of debate about the fact like how agile should data science development be. My take is that Scrum just doesn't work for it because
Could you
not
could you go further into this, because this is a very interesting.
the Scrum part. Well, I mean, because in Scrum for Scrum to work, you need to have proper planning, which you cannot really have with data projects, because the estimates that you have in data science projects are great until you run head on in the fact that I don't know, you have 5 fields in your table which have nothing to do with how they're specified in your master data document, and well, you're done. Well, you're not gonna complete your story. And the problem is that with normal software development, you also sometimes have blockers, but generally speaking, you can gauge them. You can understand how bad they are. And in data, often you cannot, because you have the problem of unknown unknowns. You don't know what you don't know because it's somewhere in data. You don't know where to look. You just stumble upon it at some point, and it can happen anytime. It can happen multiple times within one project. So it's very difficult to plan and predict. More difficult than a normal software project. And because of that, when you're scrumming, well, kind of good luck with that, because you plan certain story points for your, let's say, 2 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever.
Right. So how to make data team accountable? Is there any good idea in your opinion?
Accountable. You mean for the final result or for the specific tasks that they do?
Both.
Both. Well, I mean, accountability is a difficult topic, right? Because it's something that, well, I usually find difficult to define.
How would you define it in this very context? Because I really well, and I think that our audience also, guys, understand it really well, the problem that data team is a bunch of guys responsible for a kind of scientific experiment. However, this scientific experiment is conducted in the business environment. So some solution shall be found.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I don't have like a one size fits all solution, right? Accountability in data team, I don't think it actually differs too much from any other kind of team, right? You need to set clear goals, clear responsibilities, communicate them clearly. But those things, they're easy to talk about. They're not so easy to implement. So what I found works for me when I lead the team, when I'm in the role of the manager, it's let me remember, there was I've been listening to a TED Talk some time ago, and I forgot the name of the presenter, but she was talking about the concept of radical candor. It's basically when you, as a leader, as a team lead, CEO, and so on, when you give feedback and talk to people in the team in the way that is very direct and open, so you don't, sugarcoat problems when they exist on one hand, but on the other hand, you always do this as the same good faith. So you don't try to, you try to grow the person, you try to help them out, you don't try to make them feel guilty or otherwise, force them into doing the task or doing it correctly, but you try to apply those two dimensions. In practice, this is about authenticity in how you talk to people and how you set tasks and what you expect of them. So when I do this, for example, the first step that I usually take when I try to make people feel accountable on the project, I talk about my own motivation and my own incentives to work on it. So with my customers, it's usually pretty straightforward, right? With my customers, it's usually, it's also depends, changes from project to project, but oftentimes it's something like along the lines that I'm working on the project with you. I want to bring to success because as an entrepreneur, it will help a company. I will have a good case study. I can invite you to a conference with me, essentially grow my business. That's let's say, the overarching motivation that I have working on the projects. And when I communicated, people, I mean, on one hand, it's obvious, right? As an external consultant, which I often am to my customers, or mostly am to my customers, this is yeah, I mean, it's kind of obvious. It's clear motivation. What is not so clear or not so common is actually to say it out loud, to communicate it to people, to be like, hey, I want to do this, and I'm taking responsibility 1, 2, 3 in this project because my interest is, and then you define it. This kind of formula I find works very well because people can plug and play with this formula, right? They can drop in their own motivation, their own goals, and their own situation and incentives into this kind of formula, so to say, and they can relate it to themselves. And I often, I don't do this usually with new teams because they don't have enough trust, but with teams that I worked for a couple of months at least, I often do this exercise that I talk through my own motivation and I take on the commitment that stems from this motivation. And then I ask everybody to do the same. And I usually actually don't ask them to do this publicly. So
Right.
I do this publicly myself to take the first step, but I don't require them to reciprocate one-to-one and be like, oh, and my motivation is blah, blah, blah. I don't do that because people are usually, well, shy, afraid. They may not want to communicate motivation directly to all of the other team members. In the perfect world, they would. In the real world, people often don't want to do that. And let's say usually give them the opportunity not to communicate it to the whole team. Although, again, it would be better if they did. But I don't, let's say, force anybody, don't require anybody to do that. I usually try to get this then later on in one-on-one conversations and Zoom fixes and stuff like that. I invite people to think about this question and basically define the responsibility that they want to take themselves, right? It could stem from the desire to get promoted, from the desire to do something good for their colleagues, let's say on the business side, because they may have been going like for coffee with someone for 3 years. And that person, let's say from procurement department, has been complaining that they cannot put their suppliers in check. And this data scientist like, oh, okay, let's do some supplier analytics, segmentation, let's analyze payment terms, whatnot, and I can help them, right? It can be a very, very personal reason, frankly, just because they personally like somebody from that department. And
some people just like to help, and it's, let's say,
exactly,
a motivation for a bunch
and
of professions.
if you build that bridge, let's say, and I never impose the motivation. So I give tasks to people, right? As a manager, I give tasks, we define them together, of course, but at the end of the day, if I need to be like, hey, you do this, then I also do this. Of course, I prefer more meritocratic approaches, let's say, but if it's needed to give a task directly to a person and require them to do it, I also, let's say, use those more, let's say, authoritarian approaches, which I don't like, but if needed, again, I also apply them. But I never do that in motivation. Like I never tell the person why they're supposed to be interested, why they're supposed to feel accountable, because it's bullshit. I mean, if I say that, they're going to be like, oh yeah, thank you, Dennis, like very nice to hear from you.
It was
But
quite common 20 years ago, I think, in most businesses.
It's still very common. It's still very common. 20 years ago, I was not anymore in the kindergarten, but I was in early school, so I'm not really sure what was going on in the business then. But let's say in my almost 10 years career now on the market, I've seen that many times, especially with larger established companies, which are all often very inert in terms of culture change. They can be just the same in terms of culture as they were 30 years ago. There you see this kind of things all over the place. Much less in startups or newer companies, but still, it's not panacea, right? You know, often people like, oh, we're young and dynamic, and that means it equals we're good or whatever, come work for us. Doesn't work like that. If you're young but you're a jerk as a manager, then working for you will suck. It doesn't. I mean, age is very much irrelevant. It is sometimes correlated with the attitudes. It is quite often, I would say, correlated, but it has no causality whatsoever there. I've met people of all ages on all the spectrums of, let's say, meritocratic to totally authoritarian management styles. So it's very, very spread out in that regard.
I feel old.
You shouldn't. That's actually my point. You shouldn't, because I've met also a bunch of people. Well, most recently, he's actually not a data scientist, he's a photographer. But I met a guy who's like 62, 64 years old. He feels just like one of my friends for like 30 something. Because I mean, he has young spirit. He acts in a way that is forward-looking, cooperative, and that's basically how I define it. People tend, and there's a bunch of research on that, which I cannot quote right now because I don't remember it, but there's a bunch of research saying that people get more conservative with age in terms of political, economic outlook.
Looking
but
at
not
myself,
everybody.
at least.
not everybody. And in some ways, it's a positive factor to preserve society, because if you only want to disrupt and destroy and do everything new, as a lot of young people want to do, oftentimes just to assert their existence in life or in business, it's also not going to work. Because again, coming back to this exploitation versus exploration debate, well, you need some things that work to build something on top of that, because if you disrupt everything, then you're in the middle of a burned field and nothing works. So I think this is a very natural, maybe also I would speculate, an evolutionary advantage, that people get more conservative with age so that they can keep things that work working, and those that don't, well, then they're not needed probably.
Definitely, it was a good thing for centuries, but with the current speed of technological development,
no, yeah,
this is quite crazy. So
it is totally crazy.
I'm 45 this year, and I survived like the fall of communism, the invention of internet, the eruption of mobile phones, smartphones, social networks, and now ChatGPT. So I think that, let's say, people had entered more experience, and I use the word enter because imagine people who were born in the 1920s, what did they have to go through, right? But in terms of technology, I think my generation is quite unique, having lived through so many disruptions. Or maybe it's just my perspective. What's the next big thing in AI, in your opinion?
Oh, Maciek, that's look, disclaimer, I am generally an AI optimist, which means that I tend to gravitate philosophically to the idea that artificial intelligence will bring more good than bad in very broad terms, which is also very difficult to define what is good, what is bad. You know, something that is good for one person, they found like $100 bill on the street, well, somebody lost it apparently, right? So it's very difficult to define from the
I don't mean AGI, I don't mean, any kind of science fiction utopia or dystopia.
Well, it's not science fiction anymore. That's the point. That's the point.
Is it graph AI?
That's not science fiction anymore. It is, I believe, very close. I used to, like 10 years ago or 8 years ago, I used to think it's like 50 years away. I'm like, well, we're lucky if we don't get screwed up by the end of this year. I mean, I oscillate on this topic a lot, so it's difficult to come to a final conclusion. If you mean in more technological sense, well, I think that that the next big step, the next idea that is sort of still missing, but starts to being developed with what I just mentioned, actually, Auto GPT, Baby AGI, and Hugging GPT are the three of the new systems, which are essentially establishing communication between the different neural nets. And communication in the sense that, well, pretty much as it sounds, they talk to each other. And since many of those are language generation models, large language models that generate text, they are quite literally talking to each other. I think this is one of the massive things that's gonna change all of the knowledge work as we know it. Well, white collar jobs, let's say, as they're generally called. And it's basically, well, Hugging GPT, for example. It's a bunch of models stitched together by a ChatGPT or GPT-4 in the center. I don't remember, maybe GPT-4 because it's substantially more advanced. That receives a task such as, here's the video. Tell me how many people are in the video and what they're doing, something like that. I don't remember honestly to the exact task that was given in the paper. But essentially, ChatGPT receives this prompt from a person, receives a video file from the person, and then what it does, it creates a bunch of tasks for different models. It finds on its own the other neural nets through the Transformers library, which is the library built by Hugging Face, open source library, and uses them to, well, segment out the objects on the video, count them up, describe them, and then use text to speech to tell you in a human or human-like voice what's going on and how many objects are there. So those are, I mean, like 4, I guess, different tasks which are executed by 4 different systems, with human doing nothing, with human uploading a video and saying, hey, give me this, give me that. It might sound like, oh, whatever. I'm not sure, Maciek, how it sounds to you. So let me know. In my eyes,
kind of scary to me on one hand, because I feel limited as a human being with such a tool. Let's say at a deeper level. So let's say I'm asking myself kind of existential questions. Where am I as a human being, with my creativity, with myself, if something's done not by myself? But still I'm giving a spark, but I feel limited to being only a spark in the process. On the other hand, I try to use, I write quite a lot in social media. And of course, I tried out generative model, ChatGPT, of course. And I reckon that this is kind of all, what the right word would be, very processed, like processed food. If you want something like natural, right? With all this, all this hype now with food called bio, right? Another anecdote. In the 1990s, I was for the first time in a non-communist country, which was Great Britain at the time. Which was Great Britain because some of my family lived there, and my grandma took me there and to visit, and she said, beware. She's been there before, and she said, beware, because they have, let's say, really, really ugly food. And because it was processed. And I guess that, let's say, we all now have the same kind of food. And the real food, like what we treated as really good food in 1990 is now called bio. So this is an analogy to me to AI generated creative content's not the right word, creative stuff, and something done by hand, by a human being. It does have different meaning, flavor, whatever you call it.
But what if you won't be able to tell it apart? What if in a year, 2 or 3, the quality of this text would be better? What if the creative spark in such models will achieve the level that will be indistinguishable for human level? So maybe, I don't know, maybe, for example, high-level research, deep end PhD work, and so on will probably still not be available for such systems for some time. But, well, let's be honest, most of us don't do science on that level or deep creative work on that level. So it is, even like I write music also, for example. I write songs and I play guitar, I sing, and recently I finally started recording this stuff. And as a musician, I just love it, and I will just keep doing it independent of whether AI exists or not, because I need to do it. Like, I cannot really stop doing it. But for the listener, like if you're going in your car, or if you're washing dishes and you're playing some music in the background, if you're in the supermarket, in the bar, and there's some music playing, will you be able to tell if that music is a creative spark of human genius, like whatever, Beethoven, whatever, or is it an AI generated piece of music? Like already today, I mean, Google recently, they didn't release it, but they built a model which is called Music LM, which is also a language, well, not language-based, let's say token-based model, which represents music in a similar fashion that language does. I mean, most of the newest developments are based on the transformer architecture, which treats everything as a language, essentially as a sequence of things, tokens. And they built this model that you can hum into it, be like, and then you say, hey, make a saxophone sound out of it, or a guitar sound of it. And it does.
Don't you feel a difference, Dennis?
In the sound?
No, in this something. Because for instance, if I ask ChatGPT to write an essay, he will use, I'm using the word not it, but he. That's interesting.
Anthropomorphization, yeah, it's very common.
Freudian mistake. And this thing will always use a pattern. And for instance, writing a good column is playing upon the recipient's connotations, the recipient's cultural code, this kind of stuff. And the generative language model will make it like opening, expanding the topic, closing. It feels dry. I don't know how it is with music.
So, well, one thing is that those structures, they exist for a reason, because that's how people write. A standard song from, especially from the past, whatever, 40 years, 30, let's say 20 years, when it got really bad, it has all the same structure. Like, it has all the same structure. It's verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, chorus. Like 90% of songs have this structure. In terms of harmony, like which chords you use, there are also like 10 different chord progressions that are used in 90% of different songs. And again, they're used for a reason. Pop melodies and rock melodies, also to a large extent, they also tend to follow similar patterns. And they follow similar patterns because human brains, they latch onto patterns. Human brains like patterns. They find patterns, you know, in the form of the clouds in the sky, which are one of the like truly chaotic things due to turbulence and unpredictability of airflows. Clouds are one of the most unpredictable things that we know of in nature. But people still manage to find faces and whatever, dogs and whatever they want in the form of the clouds because they like patterns. And those systems right now, they basically regurgitate what humans have created, right? ChatGPT is trained on a large chunk of the public internet. And sort of what it does, it kind of average the information on a certain topic. And this is why it feels kind of processed, because it is. It is processed. You have, I don't know, 1,000 articles on the topic, I don't know, how to increase conversion on your e-commerce website, let's say 1,000 or 10,000 or however many, and ChatGPT extracts essentially an essence of those articles and spits it out at you. Because it's averaging, you don't have outliers in the responses of ChatGPT. You usually don't have completely crappy responses that a very inexperienced marketer would write to that question, but you also don't have the very best, the cream of the crop, whatever it's called, responses that the best of the marketers invent, because again, it averages responses out. But this is now in 2023. Like, frankly, ChatGPT exists just for 4 months. I expected this level of performance back in 2016 when the first chatbot craze started, when I joined the chatbot community back in the day. And then I tested about 2,000 different chatbots because there were like directories of them. I just went through them and I tested every single one on Telegram, on Slack, on Facebook Messenger, Kik, anything I could find them, because I wanted to know the market. And they were horrible. Like, none of them really performed anything what I expected, and I didn't know that at the time, because again, 2016 is also a while ago. I just started my journey in this field at the time. But what I understand now is that well we were 7 years away from that level, because ChatGPT, it struck me just the same way as 100 million of other people that started using it in the shortest time. Because it was good, because it was damn good. And when the thing gets so good within like 18 months, because GPT-3 was released about 18 or 20 months, I don't remember exactly, before ChatGPT, on
late
the
2020.
in the background, it was almost 2 years, right? Something like 2 years. It's not that much in a historic perspective, and it's almost the same model. It just was retrained, or fine-tuned rather, in a different way, with reinforcement learning with human feedback, which is a fancy word for saying that the model spits an answer. You ask a question, the model spits an answer at you, and you do thumbs up or thumbs down. That's the simple explanation for this fancy word, and that's it. And they did it for 2 years, and it brought this model to the level which were completely unimaginable just a couple of years ago, even by people who work in the field. And looking at that, I'm like, well, okay, maybe in a month, a year or 2 or 5, you're going to have models which will be not just averaging, but will be much farther to the level of the best of the humans. They are already on many of the medical exams, SAT exams. GPT-4 is like top 10 percentile of humans. And like in a gazillion of tests at the same time. Like, if you or I or any other human would want to prepare for even SAT, or God forbid medical or law school exam, we would need to spend years to do that, work really hard, and still get into 10% of the best people would be really tough. I mean, logically, because those are 10% of the best people, and GPT-4 does it already. Well, imagine next iteration of GPT-5, how much better this is going to be. And next iteration, like, I mean, there are still, and this is not my idea, this is Sam Altman's, founder of one of the founders of OpenAI idea. He talks that we need at least one more big idea until we get to AGI. I think we need more than one idea, frankly, because I don't see GPT-4 becoming super intelligent. For the reason that it does just average stuff together. It doesn't really come up with novel solutions. It can reason. It can also self-improve, which is depicted in the reflection paper, which is insane. But it cannot really create new stuff. Like, yesterday, I was listening to a podcast by Ben Goetzel, which is one of the most famous AI experts.
I know Ben Goetzel. I'm a partner of Singularity Studio for.
Sweet. So say hello to Ben. I
don't know him personally,
but
yeah, I know.
I mean, this is an argument from authority, which you're not supposed to do, of course, but still rely on experts. And Ben is one of those that I listen up to in the field. And he talks, for example, that if you would feed all of the music in the world to this music LM model, Google's model, and tell it, hey, generate me something that has African rhythms, follows European 18th century harmony, it would not come up with jazz. It wouldn't. It would come up with some stuff that follows the prompt, that uses some African rhythms and European 19th whatever century harmony, but it wouldn't create jazz. And that's kind of the point. Like, at least for now, those systems are not at the level to create jazz or to create a groundbreaking scientific discovery, or do something truly amazing. But the thing is that to create a massive, drastic, and very dangerous change in our society, they don't need to be at that level, because most people aren't at that level. Like, whatever, it's a speculation, but 80, 90, 95% of the people are not at that level that they truly create new knowledge in the world. I can not really say it about myself. I created some new knowledge, I would say, or came up with some original ideas, but it's like a tiny fraction of what I've ever done. And luckily, there are a lot of people in the world who did much more of that knowledge creation than I did, or most of other people did. But this is a tiny fraction of humans, and those systems are already better and will become substantially better than most humans on the planet. And if you talk about models or conglomeration of models such as Hugging GPT or Auto GPT, and Auto GPT, just give it a task, you run it, and it does the whole thing. Like, it does the whole, it can write you the whole book after one prompt. It's insane. I mean, it usually runs in some kind of errors because it's a very new thing. It's been released like a week or 2 weeks ago. Again, extrapolate into the future, into 2 years, these models will be everywhere. And like, an average office worker already is worse than GPT-4 already. Like, to write on the level of detail and depth of knowledge, and especially breadth of knowledge. Depth of knowledge is maybe not the best metric, because depth is still lacking in most of those models. But in terms of breadth of knowledge, it's better than most humans already today, like now.
These are mind-blowing issues.
It's insane. It's insane, and nobody knows how to solve them.
My stance derives from my beliefs, and it's more a question of my personal convictions and of faith.
What do you think about it?
Than of pure science. I think that human being is unique. I don't know how to prove it, but this is what I strongly believe in. And I think that there might be major. I'm generally an optimist in all that, but I think that this will create huge changes for the better in the research field. So this will change. This scares me a bit, but I think this is in all positive, that this will change the way we human beings work intellectually. That will be kind of indirect work, like prompting, to oversimplify it, but with like this, what I call for my own purpose, deeper level creativity. Whether it's writing, whether it's making music, whether it's really breakthrough in research. I think that, let's say, human being is indispensable, and for this reason I do not believe in AGI at all. I don't believe this.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
AGI happens, or singularity happens.
Okay.
But it's let's say there are thousands of arguments, pro and con, and we could make this podcast till early morning.
Yeah, it could take a while to argue. Well, on my part, to me, singularity is a fact. of life. To me, it's, I mean, I would probably have hard time arguing about it, because it's also, of course, difficult to prove, because many people are talking, well, nature of consciousness, right? Or self-awareness. Can AI be self-aware at all or not? Well, to me, it doesn't have to be self-aware to at least destroy our economy, or maybe even destroy our species. It doesn't have to be self-aware to do that. It doesn't have to be self-aware at all to be super intelligent. So to me, those are different things. And again, this is a philosophical argument. Many people say that it's inseparable, that intelligence is inseparable from consciousness. I don't think it is. But again, that's my view of it. And to me, superintelligence is a given fact that will happen very soon. And as I mentioned before, I'm an AI optimist. I believe that a lot of fears about AGI are unfounded for a couple of simple reasons. People, even the best people, also like Eliza Yudkowsky, probably, and one of the major AI pessimists, or I would say AI alarmists, even him, he anthropomorphizes AI a lot. He prescribes intentionality to AI, prescribes basically emotions or goals, fear of death to AI. And I just think this is completely wrong, because this is, well, humans are afraid of death. Why do we think that AI will be afraid of death? Like, why? It doesn't make sense. AI is not a live being in the same sense that we are. I don't know in which way it will, if ever, understand itself. Again, self-awareness question. But I don't think it's going to be afraid of why it's supposed to be afraid of death. It's not also going to have reproductive instinct as we people do, because it's not based on genes. Genes is what drives us to reproduce. And well, AI is not based on genes. So why is it supposed to reproduce? Why it's supposed to have any desires at all? Any desires to do anything? Any emotions to be whatever, angry at humans or whatever else thing? So I think we prescribe too many human qualities to AGI and get afraid that we're going to have a conflict with it. But conflict is also a very human thing. Most animals don't really think in terms of conflicts. I mean, when the lion wants to eat the zebra, he goes out and tries to eat a zebra, but he's not angry at the zebra. He doesn't hate zebra for, being black and white and not yellow, or, living in a different way that the lion wants to live. Lion just eats. Humans are very weird animals. We are extremely weird animals. I mean, mere fact that you and I are miles and miles apart from each other, talking through some
500 kilometers.
500 kilometers. Well, it's still pretty far away. No zebra can talk to another zebra so far away. I mean, the fact that we are doing this, what we're doing, people never think about that. But the fact that we have clothes, that we have headphones, that I have a trimmer to shave my head, and there's a painting on the wall behind me, and books exist. This is completely nuts. Like the fact that and we live in boxes. This is crazy. People are pretty much insane because we do understand that we are mortal, but we prescribe the same feelings and the same desires to a being, or not even a being, to a collection of matrices. Like in terms of linear algebra, I mean, neural network is just a huge matrix of floating point numbers, as also Eliza Yudkowsky says, and I just love this definition because it's so true. Like how a matrix can have a design.
Yeah, just comparing neural networks to human brain is an intellectual
it cannot
abuse.
Be one-to-one comparison. I mean, there's also a lot of discussion that AI might be an emergent property, and I actually think that AI, if or when it comes to be, it will be an emergent property, which I think will not be in one network, but will emerge as a communication between gazillion of networks. This is why this AutoGPT and Hugging Face, why I'm so pumped and scared of this particular advancement, because this is the real step to AGI as I see it. As in, also, I suppose many other people would see it. This is going to be a communication between networks. It's not the ChatGPT is going to be super intelligent, but a million different networks working all across the globe will together constitute
isn't it the case that,
superintelligence.
let's say, this was before in the theory of evolutionary algorithm?
What exactly?
this kind of that networks communicate between themselves.
Not sure what you referring to.
Maybe I'm not that skilled to describe it properly, but evolutionary algorithm, you know, they recreate, as you well know, a better algorithm, and the more advanced version of it is that we put two neural networks, which will create a better neural network.
Better networks.
So
Might be.
we've had it before. In my opinion, when I'm not a technical guy in the field, but with the technical knowledge that I possess, this sounds, let's say, we've seen it before, kind of thinking. For the last 50 years or so, or more, for the last 70 years. And my feeling is that, but I think it's this intellectual argument will remain undecided, because this is one of the greatest problems of mankind, whether we believe in that there is something higher than ourselves, or whether we have materialistic view of the world. I see it this way, and this is actually, this has been going on for centuries, and still is undecided, and I do hope it will be. It never will. I'm on the part that, let's say, there is something bigger than a human being. Call it higher power, call it God, call it whatsoever. And that's why human beings are unique. Our life is probably the only life in the universe, though I don't pretend to be a prophet.
Yeah, I mean, these things are difficult to argue about, of course. Well, to me, GPT-4 is currently the closest we've ever come to God, to creating God, and we'll come closer and closer. And at some point,
I don't agree, but it's still difficult.
Well, I mean, look, God is omnipotent, omniscient, and omni whatever the third element, that it knows everything, can do everything, and omnibenevolent, like loves everything. I don't remember, there was like 3 major characteristics by, I think, Thomas Aquinas or some Christian philosopher. And well, GPT-4 is already kind of knows everything that is available to the humans, and as soon as it can create new knowledge, it will quickly surpass humans in knowledge.
Doesn't know everything. Robert Lewandowski still plays in Munich, I think. No, Messi plays in Barcelona. Screw, that's a joke, but really.
No. I mean, of course, but again, those things. A lot of people who criticize AI, they jump on these issues that, oh yeah, it's not super reliable, sourcing is difficult. Well, yeah, today it is. In 2 years, in 5 years, in 10 years, it's not going to be the problem. That's the point. Like, you have to look into the future. And again, you probably have heard of the exponential curves, right? This is a it's difficult. It's always difficult to compare, because I won't pretend that I fully grasp it myself. To be honest, I don't.
I don't know if anyone, including some.
No, I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so, because it's very unnatural thing to think in exponential curves, as they call them. But I mean, again, just look at what happened in the last 10 years or 11 years, since 2012, since the beginning of deep learning revolution. When the AlexNet was released in the ImageNet competition, 2012, they had, like, I think 14 or 16% jump in the accuracy of image recognition of different objects, like dogs and pencils and whatever in images. And it was the first time when they used the convolutional neural network. First time they used deep neural network in the competition, and they achieved major breakthrough. And after that, this whole craze started with people working in deep learning, because before that, nobody and again, before that, I also didn't work in the field, so I don't know how it was exactly. That's what I read or seen in the interviews. But before that, people ridiculed those who worked on deep learning models because they never believed those can converge, so come to a stable result. But then suddenly we reached the level where we had enough data and enough compute power to actually do that. And in the last 11 years, from the level of, oh, I can, like, with 70% probability recognize a dog in the picture, we came to a level where you can talk to Stable Diffusion and tell it to create a picture of a dog in any kind of setting, any number of dogs, like mix of a unicorn and a dog, and it does so. Like, to me, it's just deeply impressive. It's deeply impressive what has happened in these very short, in historic perspective, very short 11 years. And even in the last 5 months, what has happened is mind-boggling. And again, we don't see the effects yet because it has not been productized, like AutoGPT or Baby AGI. They haven't been productized, but they will. They will be productized. And, you know, maybe instead of talking to me on the podcast, you're gonna send me a couple of prompts to my own Dennis AGI, whatever, and it will just generate you the whole podcast episode with my head talking and with my voice, basically answering the way I would have answered to your questions, and we never have to need to talk. I mean, talking is just fun, so probably we'll still do it. But you know,
Yeah,
something like that.
Talking is just fun.
Yeah, I mean, humans like it. So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Dennis, it was a huge pleasure talking to you.
Same here. Thank you for the conversation.
I hope that this is not our last conversation. And I do hope, and I'm certain that our viewers liked it as much as I did.
Hope so too. Enjoyed it a lot. And yeah, hope to talk to you soon again.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for listening to Sherpa Search on Tech. If you have enjoyed the show, please subscribe to our show wherever you listen. Thanks again. The Sherpa Search on Tech podcast is a production of Sherpa Search, an executive search firm specializing in the tech industry, helping hire the right people for expert and managerial positions, and advising how to build and develop long-lasting, high-performing IT teams. If you would like to learn more, reach out to us at maciej.szczerba@sherpasearch.tech or visit our website sherpasearch.tech. See you next time.